The internal corporate recruiter lies to you. What do you do? Well, stick around because in this video, I'm going to share with you how you should handle that. Hey everybody, it's Brian from Life After Layoff, and today I want to share with you my answer to the question of the internal corporate recruiter lying to you in your interview. I was a corporate recruiter myself with over 20 years of experience interviewing and hiring thousands of people in some of the world's most well-known and well-respected companies. I do know a thing or two about recruitment. So we're going to dig into this one a little bit more, and I'm going to give you my advice on how you should handle it. So this is a new series that I'm thinking of trying where people can ask questions, employment-related questions, and I'll give you my answer, my advice on it. So if you have a question related to an employment situation, you can leave the question in the comments below. And who knows, maybe I'll answer your question in a future video. If you decide to do that, I would ask you two things. Number one is to make sure that it's broad and kind of generic and it's going to benefit most people. And also keep the question in the comments below. If you send it to my email address or to my LinkedIn or somewhere else, I'm not going to consider it for the purposes of this. And if your question doesn't get answered and you're really looking for some advice on a situation that you're in, I actually do offer some private one-on-one coaching. And I actually have a service that's 15 minutes. So if you don't need a whole hour coaching session, you can actually just sign up for the 15 minutes just to get that one specific question answered. So head over to my website and click on the coaching tab and you'll see a bunch of information there. And before we get too far into it, if you're interested in more videos just like this one directly from a corporate recruiter, make sure you hit that subscribe button and you might want to hit that notification bell so you don't miss future questions being answered just like this one. All right, so the question is the internal recruiter lied to me and I need some advice. So let's kind of dive into this question, and they gave a lot of detail on it. So I want to break it down, and I think there's some learning to be pulled out of this, and this is how I would handle this situation should I be in it myself. So it's saying that I completed 5 interviews in a startup company, starting with an internal recruiter, which would be typical, and then the hiring team VP, and then head of HR, and finally the CEO. That's a lot of interviews. If they all happen at the same time or at relatively the same time, then it's fine. But if they're like completely independent and they happen over the course of weeks, that's a lot of interviews. Okay, so the recruiter called me before every interview to give me tips. So they're basically giving you prep. So that's a good sign. I like when recruiters do that. I try to do that myself just to make sure that you are as prepared as possible for the interview. Listen, recruiters actually want you to get the job, because if you get the job, then we can close down the rec, we get a tap on the back, and we get to move on to the next one. And we are graded on how many recs we fill, how quickly we fill them. There's a lot of different metrics. So recruiters actually do want you to get the job. Just kind of throwing that out there. In the first 3 interviews, I refused to tell them about my current salary or discuss expected salary. Now let's kind of put a stake in that for a second. Let's break that down. So you went through 3 rounds of interviews. That includes, it looks like a pre-screen with an internal corporate recruiter. Then you went through the hiring team, and then I would imagine the VP of hiring, which would, I'm assuming that would be the hiring manager. If you go through 3 rounds of interviewing and you haven't discussed salary at all, you absolutely need to discuss that. Because number one, you need to make sure that you're aligned with what the corporation and or the opportunity and yourself. You need to make sure that you're aligned to what the salary is. You know, if they're only going to pay $50,000 and you need $100,000, then you're wasting your time. So you absolutely need to get that out there. And a good corporate recruiter is going to cover that question in the pre-screen. There's not a single pre-screen that I go through that I don't ask the question of what's your expected salary for this position. And in that case, if the recruiter is not asking, or if I'm not asking you that question, it probably, well, almost assuredly means that I don't think I'm going to move you on to the next round. So there's really not a point in me asking you. I guess there's probably a time where I have forgot to ask the question and maybe it was an honest mistake. But if the corporate recruiter is not asking you that question, it is absolutely appropriate for you to bring that question up yourself prior to moving on to additional rounds of interviewing. So where I would bring that question up is the recruiter calls you back and says, we'd like to set you up for another round of interviews. You're going to meet with these 4 or 5 other people. And then they start trying to get scheduling from you. And at that point in time, it's absolutely appropriate to say, I'm happy to go through the rest of the interviewing process. I just want to make sure that we are both on the same page from a compensation perspective, because I don't believe it was covered in the initial pre-screen. Do you have an idea of the range that you're looking to pay for this position? And then you put the question onto the internal corporate recruiter, preferably. I wouldn't save it for the VP of HR or the hiring manager or any of those. Unless the hiring manager is in talent acquisition, I would really just save it for and let the internal corporate recruiter handle that question. So getting to the third interview without having discussed salary is kind of a little bit of shame on you, to be perfectly honest with you, and a little bit of shame on them. So we shouldn't get to the third interview without having discussed current salary, because you run into these types of situations that this person's going to describe. So after the interview, the VP, which was the third interview, the recruiter then called me the same day asking about salary. So you finally get to the third round VP. Now, if you're not aligned on salary, you're wasting your time, you're wasting the VP's time, you're wasting the hiring team's time, and the recruiter is just spinning wheels. So this person is saying that they refused to tell the recruiter their salary expectation, but asked about the budget of the position. Okay, that's fair enough. And she said that the minimum requirement would be $15K. So I'm assuming that this is a different country that this person is interviewing in, based on the wages. So I'm not sure what country it is, but I'm assuming that's a different country than the United States. So I told her that I'm willing to continue the process, and she assured me that they don't ask about my salary to pay me less than the budget. They just want to see if the budget suits you, and that's fair enough. That's exactly why we ask the question too, just to make sure that we're not wasting anybody's time. I told her that it does, and we proceeded to schedule the fourth interview. Okay, so probably a little bit, you handled it a little later into the interviewing process than we would like, but at least it got handled. During the fourth interview, the head of HR asked about salary. So you're getting salary question from another person, which is, generally speaking, in most organizations, the talent acquisition team, in particular the recruiter, handles the salary expectation communication with the candidate. We don't want to see multiple parties asking those questions, because it just clouds the waters, and it sounds like this. I'm assuming this is what's going to happen here. But she asked about salary, and I told her that I have been informed about the range and that I'm okay with it, and that's perfectly acceptable way to answer that. She insisted that I share my salary and nothing. She insisted that if I share my salary, nothing will change and I won't be paid less. So I did, which was a huge mistake, and that was $7,000. So about half of what the position is paying, or what they had budgeted to pay. So in the United States, this question, in a lot of cases, I shouldn't say in every case, but in a lot of cases, is considered an illegal question in a lot of states. So there are a lot of states have passed laws, and I've kind of talked about that in other videos. So if the hiring manager is asking you to disclose your wages or your salary, this is going to be to me, is a red flag question, because you should be paid based on what you're worth, not on what some other company has paid you in the past. So if you up-leveled your skills, you're more valuable. They should be paying you the value of the position, not what you are most recently making. And that's, in fact, the reason why a lot of these laws have been passed, is because people were being held to previous employment. So if you made $10,000 in your last job, just kind of using as their terms, they would say, well, we'll pay you $12,000. That's a 20% increase. But even though they were slated to pay $20,000, and to them, they think they're getting a bargain, and they say, well, you're still getting a raise. And that kind of was happening a lot. So a lot of these states in the United States started to pass laws about that, so that you can't do that. So in that case, and you have to use your judgment for the country that you're operating in or that you're interviewing in, because each country is going to have their own protocols. But I'm saying in general, and this is how I would handle this in the United States, if the question came up, what's your salary or what's your previous salary, I would answer it something like this. My salary expectation was covered previously, and I prefer to be focused on what the position is worth rather than what my current compensation is. And just kind of leave it at that. That may upset the interviewer who is asking you that question, but if they're upset by that and they're asking you a question that's going to compromise you, then they should be upset by it, and you should not be worried about it, because it's probably going to be a crappy opportunity, and you should probably not even be sitting there interviewing with them anyway. So that being said, in this circumstance, after the interview, the recruiter called me and mentioned that the budget has suddenly shifted to 13 to 16, which is still kind of, it's still in the range. So they gave him a kind of, it looks like an in-between range. That seems fine. She also arranged the last interview with the CEO. So it looks like the candidate at this point is in good faith interviewing based on the assumption that it's going to be around $15,000. So then after the interview, she calls to tell me that they want to offer me a job in the range of 10 to 15. So suddenly the range has reduced significantly down to 10K. So, I mean, obviously that's a red flag. That's a complete red flag. So I told her that you only lowered the range because I shared my salary, which is true. That's exactly what this company was doing. And that's, again, why the laws were passed. And she said, no, we do benchmarking based on current salary, which is, again, the reason why these laws were passed. You should not be held like a scarlet letter to your previously low salary, especially if you're moving into a different job type or you were in a bad quality employer. You shouldn't have that follow you along the rest of your career. So I'm surprised that more countries even aren't going in that direction, but it's a shame that there are apparently still companies and countries that do that. So I said, why did you lie and start sharing and say sharing my salary won't change the range then? And she said that there are two positions, and she was talking about the other one, which is a lie. Okay, so the VP and the CEO mentioned there's only one position. So now you've got this head of HR who is I'm assuming this is head of HR. No, this is the recruiter. Okay, sorry. This is the recruiter who's saying this. Now the recruiter is being shady and lying about this position and lying about the two jobs. She mentions that I don't have enough experience to be paid based on the first range. So if that's the case, then why did they call him to begin with? Why did she move him through the interview process to begin with? That's, to me, is completely invalid, and I'm not buying that. And I told her that I could have lied about my salary, and she was like, yeah, but we will ask you to provide the salary slip. And again, that's more common in countries outside of the United States. I don't know how to give you advice on that one. If that's common protocol in your country, that sucks, but it is what it is. But in the United States, they absolutely cannot do that. So I told them I'm not required to do that by law. Okay, so it looks like by law in their country, they're not required to do that. So good on you for holding firm and not letting these predatory recruiters and companies walk all over you. So good on you, whoever put this question out. She agreed anyway, and she said that she will discuss it with the HR head and get back to me, but I don't get a good feeling about this. So what should I do? Well, first of all, I think that you handled it properly as far as pushing back when you should push back. I think all of the red flags are there for this position to be predatory. Now, you're in a situation where it's like you're in a lower paying job, and even at 10K, it's still going to be an upgrade. But you got to think about whether or not is that company the kind of company that you really want to work for. If they're willing to do that, I guarantee you're going to run into other issues with them being shady with pay or being shady with the way that they treat people. So you have to use your intuition and your gut to make the decision on whether or not this is going to be a good opportunity for you long term. I mean, you may use it if they're going to, if this country does these types of things where they use your last pay, try to get up to the higher pay range and use it. I hate to say the term job hop, but in this case, you might want to job hop into this role to then parlay it into an even bigger role. And it sucks that you have to do it that way. But, in this case, maybe that's what you do. But in general, I think you handled it absolutely properly, pushing back on the recruiters, not taking any BS from them. Clearly, the recruiter was lying. If the recruiting team is lying and trying to get you to sign the dotted line or baiting and switching you, then it's a huge red flag. I mean, there's no way around that, and I would personally cut bait. It just depends on how badly you want this job, and it still could get you a decent size raise. I'm not sure what countries what the currency is, so it's hard to say, but based on these numbers, it looks like it's a pretty sizable raise even at the lower end of that range. And I would just, if they do come back and offer you the job at like 10, I would absolutely be countering to 15 and just say, stay firm on 15. I'm not accepting anything less than 15. See what happens. All right. So again, if you have any questions for me, leave them a comment below. I will try to answer. I'm going to make this a series and see how it goes. And if it goes smoothly, then we'll continue it. If it doesn't go smoothly, then I won't do it anymore. But leave a comment below with your question. Try to be specific, but also vague. Specific in that, give me enough information to kind of break down the situation, but be general enough that everybody or a good chunk of people are going to benefit from going through the question. If it's too specialized and it's too nuanced to you, unfortunately, I'm not going to cover that type of question in a video just because it's not going to benefit that many people. In which case, again, if you need to ask a specific question, I do offer that service. But anyway, I will look for your questions and I will try to do, I'm probably just going to answer one question per video. So I'll probably select almost like lottery, one lucky winner interview. And as always, if you need help in your interviewing or trying to land your dream job, I have a whole website dedicated to that. It's lifeafterlayoff.com, and I've got all the links in there. So you can check out the bio of this video. You'll see that. I've got some training courses as well that will help you kind of supercharge your, and will help you avoid some of these predatory companies. So appreciate you watching. We'll see you on the next one.